The river wasn't supposed to rise that fast. By the time Jason Miller realized the current had turned, the school bus was already half submerged, pinned sideways against the twisted guardrail where Mill Creek spilled into the Ohio. Headlights flickered under brown, churning water. Children's hands slapped against the glass. Their screams didn't travel far over the roar of the flood. The rescue trucks were stuck a quarter-mile back on the overrun road, red and blue lights flashing uselessly through the sheets of rain. Radios crackled with static. Cell service was dead. Somebody yelled that the bridge might go next. Jason stood in a 12-foot aluminum John boat knuckles white around the wooden oar, soaked to the bone. On his wrist, a small, ugly plastic device pulsed steadily, a homemade beacon, sending out a signal he knew only a handful of people in the county could even pick up. Straps. That was all that separated those kids from being swept out into the main river, 2 torn nylon straps on the emergency exit door already starting to peel. Jason shoved the boat closer, bow slamming against hidden debris. A girl's face appeared in the side window, freckles-washed pale mouth, forming a single word, please. Behind Jason, on the crumbling embankment, a black SUV fishtailed to a stop. A woman in a soaked blazer stumbled out heels, sinking in the mud eyes, going straight to the sinking bus. Her name was Amanda Rhodes, the same corporate powerhouse who'd laughed at his little gadgets in a town hall meeting 3 weeks earlier. Right now, her 10-year-old daughter was inside that bus, and Jason's useless hobby was the only working lifeline in the valley. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight, and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world. Most days, Jason Miller's life didn't look anything like a movie. He was 37, a second-shift forklift driver at a distribution warehouse outside of Cincinnati, the kind of place where the fluorescent lights buzzed, the coffee tasted burned, and time was measured in pallets, moved instead of hours passed. He wore steel-toed boots with worn-out laces and a high-visibility vest that never quite lost the smell of diesel. Home was a rented duplex on a quiet, dead-end street, paint peeling on the porch rail basketball hoop, leaning sideways in the driveway. Inside, there were science posters on the walls, a Lego city on the coffee table, and a pair of beat-up sneakers that seemed permanently parked by the front door. Those belonged to his son, Noah. Noah was 9, all elbows, and questions the kind of kid who wanted to know how every single thing worked. Why the sirens sounded different on an ambulance than a police car. Why tornado sirens tested on Wednesdays. Why his mom never came home from that last winter drive, even though the hospital was only 20 minutes away. Jason still heard the dispatcher's voice sometimes when he closed his eyes. "We're trying to locate them now, sir. Snow's bad. GPS is unclear." The paramedics had done their best in that whiteout. They just couldn't find the wreck in time. From that night on, Jason's brain had latched on to one thought and refused to let go. People shouldn't die just because nobody can find them. So when he wasn't lifting pallets and dodging careless forklift drivers, he was at his kitchen table with a soldering iron, messing with cheap GPS modules, old ham radio parts, and waterproof casings he ordered from surplus catalogs. He called them beacon bands, ugly little wrist straps, and key tags that could ping out a location even when cell towers failed. They weren't polished. They weren't pretty. But in Jason's mind, they were one thing that hadn't existed the night his wife slid off that icy road. He tested them every Sunday with Noah, hiking into the woods behind their neighborhood and seeing how far the signal would reach. A retired radio operator 2 streets over Mr. Calhoun would text him the coordinates he picked up, grinning with the thrill of it. "You're onto something, son," the old man would say. "People don't think about getting found until it's too late." Jason believed that. He also believed nobody with real power would care unless he made them listen. So when the county announced a public safety innovation night at the Civic Center, with business leaders, first responders, and local officials, invited Jason, scraped together gas money, printed cheap flyers at the library, and showed up with a shoebox full of beacon bands and more hope than he'd admit. That was the night he first locked eyes with Amanda Rhodes, the polished CEO, whose company owned half the warehouses along the river, and the night she turned his life's work into a punchline in front of the whole town. By the following week, the flyer from that public safety innovation night was still taped crookedly on the break room bulletin board at the warehouse. Someone had drawn a cartoon lightning bolt beside Jason's name and written Mr. Gadget Man in Sharpie. Nobody admitted to doing it, but the smirks were easy enough to read. Word traveled fast around a place like Fulton River Distribution. Faster than freight. Jason didn't say anything. He just pulled on his gloves, scanned the incoming pallets, and kept moving. But in the rhythm of the warehouse, forklifts, beeping tape guns, snapping radios, crackling, there was a new undercurrent he couldn't ignore. Every time he walked past the loading docks, someone muttered a joke about him building toys again. At lunch, 2 drivers joked loud enough for him to hear that maybe he'd hook the forklifts up to alien tracking beacons next. He wanted to ignore it. He tried. But by Thursday, the noise had settled into a steady throb behind his ribs, the kind that reminded him of the way paramedic sirens had once pulsed through the cold night above his wife's wreck. Not painful, exactly, just impossible to forget. The warehouse supervisor, a barrel-shaped man named Riggs, stopped him during shift change. He held one of the beacon bands between 2 fingers like it might leak battery acid. "Look," Riggs said, voice thick with impatient authority. "I can't have employees messing around with side projects on company time." Jason blinked. "I haven't touched that here." "Doesn't matter. Customers talk, drivers talk, my bosses talk. Had a vendor ask if we were turning this place into a hobby shop. That's not I'm telling you how it looks." Riggs shoved the device back toward him. "Leave your gadgets at home, and stop distracting the crew." Jason took the band quietly. There was no point arguing with someone who'd already decided what the truth was. He slipped the little device into his vest pocket, feeling the familiar weight of everything he couldn't say. This isn't a toy. This could save someone. It might have saved her. But the warehouse wasn't the place for the past. It barely tolerated the present. When he got home that night, Noah was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by scraps of wire cardboard and duct tape. The boy looked up with bright eyes and a proud smile. "Dad, I made something, watch." He pressed a button on a bent piece of foil tape, and a tiny LED blinked once before sputtering out. Noah frowned, wiggled a wire, and the light flickered weakly back to life. "It's supposed to flash if somebody falls on the trail," he said, "like a signal for hikers." Jason smiled, tired but genuine. "That's amazing, buddy. Want help making it brighter?" Before Noah could answer, the duplex front door swung open, and their neighbor, Mrs. Worthing, stepped inside. She always knocked as she entered, which wasn't exactly the same as being invited. "Jason," she said sharply, "we need to talk about your boy." Jason's muscles tensed, the smile fading. "What's wrong? He took one of those contraptions to school today. Caused a panic in the office. The principal called me since I'm listed as your emergency contact." Noah shrank back, shoulders curling. "It wasn't a panic," Noah whispered. "I just wanted to show them." "He plugged something into a classroom outlet," she snapped. Lights flickered. "It was just a little power draw," Noah murmured, flushing red. Jason knelt beside him. "Did you test it before?" he asked, softly. Noah shook his head. Mrs. Worthing crossed her arms. "Your son is starting to think like you. And frankly, Jason, someone has to say it, these inventions of yours. They're making him a target. Kids are calling him Circuit Boy," he cried in the hallway. Jason's throat tightened. She didn't mean to be cruel. She thought she was helping. That made it worse somehow. "I'll talk to the school," he said. "And to Noah." "You do that," she said, brushing mud from her raincoat. "And maybe ease up on all the gadget stuff. It isn't healthy. Children need structure, not projects." She left without waiting for an answer. Jason locked the door gently. The kitchen felt smaller, quieter, colder. "I didn't mean to mess things up," Noah whispered, twisting his fingers in his shirt. "You didn't mess anything up," Jason said, pulling him close. "Wanting to help people isn't wrong." Noah nodded into his chest, but Jason felt the boy's small frame trembling. The world was turning their curiosity into embarrassment, their ideas into burdens, their hope into something to hide. Later that night, after Noah fell asleep with a half-finished wiring diagram stuck to his cheek, Jason sat at the kitchen table, with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone lukewarm. The beacon band lay in front of him, its casing smudged with dirt from the warehouse floor. He turned it over thumb, resting on the rubberized panic button. He'd tested this design 100 times. It could send a location ping beyond the valley bounce off amateur radio frequencies, even push through dense tree cover. It wasn't perfect, but nothing ever was. Not the night of the accident. Not the emergency systems that had failed when his wife needed them. "Dad." Noah stood in the hallway, eyes puffy. Jason set the device down gently. "What's wrong, bud? Are people always going to make fun of you for trying to help?" The question hit harder than any warehouse insult could. "I don't know," Jason admitted. "Maybe. But that doesn't make them right." Noah nodded slowly. "Then, can we still work on my hiker light?" Jason forced a smile. "Yeah, we can." But after Noah went back to bed, Jason's hands stayed wrapped around the beacon band long after the house fell quiet. He wasn't doubting the invention. He was doubting whether he had the strength to keep putting his son through the fallout that came with it. The next day was payday. Never a relief. Always a short-lived breath before bills devoured everything again. At the warehouse, a new memo had gone up. All personal equipment must be approved by management before entering the premises. Riggs didn't say Jason's name, but he didn't have to. Everyone knew. During break, Jason sat alone by the vending machines. 2 forklift drivers at the next table spoke in voices loud enough to carry. Heard Miller's little wrist toys jammed the Wi-Fi at the Civic Center. Probably picked up alien signals. A bark of laughter. Guy should stick to lifting pallets. Jason closed his eyes briefly. He'd lived through worse nights filled with flashing lights and frantic questions, but the sting was still sharp. Around 3 o'clock, the warehouse alarms triggered for the mandatory safety drill. Everyone filed into the yard. Clipboards came out. Someone opened a box labeled Emergency Response Kits, a tangle of outdated flares and expired bandages. Riggs scanned the crowd, then landed on Jason. "You," he barked. "Show the new guys how to check the respirator fit." Jason hesitated. Those respirators expired last year. Riggs's jaw tightened. "Do it anyway." Jason lifted one of the dusty masks. The straps were brittle from heat. One tug, and it tore clean off. A few workers snickered. "You see," Riggs said, shrugging. "This is why we follow procedures, not inventions." Jason bit down hard on the inside of his cheek. He wanted just for once to say something sharp, something true, something that could pierce the thick wall of stubborn ignorance around him. But Noah's face flashed in his mind, the boy's trembling question. And Jason swallowed the words. He never saw Amanda Rhodes approach. She stepped into the drill site wearing a tailored coat and an expression that didn't match the glossy confidence she'd shown at the town hall. Her eyes swept the crowd until they landed on him. A flicker of recognition, a tightening of her jaw. Then to Riggs. "Is this your safety lead?" Riggs blinked. No. He's just Miller, one of the drivers." She turned her attention fully to Jason. "I remember you," she said. "The one with the bracelets." "Beacon bands," Jason said quietly. "Yes, beacon bands." Her tone wasn't mocking this time, but it wasn't kind either. "We need to talk." Workers exchanged looks. Even Riggs stepped back. Amanda folded her arms. "Yesterday my daughter's school had a lockdown drill. She panicked, couldn't find me. Said she wished she had one of those bands of yours so she'd know somebody could find her." Her gaze sharpened. "She's 10, and she thinks your gadgets make her safer than we do." Jason blinked, unsure what to do with the sudden shift. "You've stirred up expectations," she continued. "People are asking why we don't already have more advanced tracking for emergencies. And now my board wants answers. You're making my work harder." She stepped closer. "So I need to know, are these things of yours reliable, or are you just giving kids false hope?" The warehouse yard seemed to tilt slightly. For a moment, Jason couldn't tell which hurt more, the accusation or the idea that a frightened child had wanted exactly what his wife hadn't had the night she died. "I don't give false hope," he said quietly. "Not ever." Amanda studied him a moment longer, then nodded once. Not approval, not agreement. Something more like acknowledgement before walking away. The workers stared after her, then at Jason, as though seeing him for the first time, but not in a good way. Now he was trouble. Attention, questions, vulnerability. Riggs moved in fast. "I don't know what game you're playing," he hissed, "but I'm not letting you drag this warehouse into your personal experiments." Jason's jaw tightened. "I didn't drag anyone into anything. You brought her here." "I didn't." Riggs jabbed a finger at his chest. "One more distraction. One more complaint. You're done." Jason didn't answer. Couldn't. The world had gone slightly muffled, like the air right before a storm. He drove home in silence, the Ohio River swollen from last night's rain, brushing against the grassy banks with a hungry sound. Something inside him, the tiredness, the humiliation, the helplessness pressed against his ribs like a rising tide. That night when Jason tucked Noah in, the boy didn't ask about inventions. He didn't reach for the wiring diagram. He just looked up with wide, uncertain eyes. "Dad," he whispered, "did I get you in trouble?" Jason sat on the edge of the bed, heart twisting. "No," he said. "You didn't do anything wrong. But people keep getting mad. At you. At me. Because of stuff we make." Jason swallowed, brushing Noah's hair back gently. He'd promised himself he would never let the world smother the spark inside this kid. But right now his son was shrinking from that spark, scared of it. That was the moment Jason felt something shift inside him. Not breaking, not quitting, but tightening into a hard, steady resolve. A pressure building toward something inevitable. He kissed Noah's forehead, turned off the light, and went back to the kitchen table where the beacon band lay waiting. Outside, thunder rolled over the valley. Something was coming, and the whole valley would feel it. Jason was awake long before dawn, though he couldn't pinpoint the moment sleep left him. He only knew that the air felt strange, heavy, unsettled, and the quiet of the duplex had the brittle stillness of a held breath. By the time he poured coffee, thunder was already stalking the valley, low and restless, rolling across the river like a warning. The morning news murmured in the background, a meteorologist pointing at a red band on the map. Flash flood watch from noon onward. Saturated soil. Sudden rise possible in low-lying areas. Jason barely heard the rest. Not because he dismissed it, but because his mind had been tracking the river's behavior for years now. Ever since the night he learned how long a person could wait in the dark, praying for help. Rivers, storms, roads, delays. He'd memorized the ways they could betray you. He'd just zipped Noah's backpack when his phone buzzed with a warehouse group alert. Route 47 bridge closed. Bus detours for elementary pickup. Expect delays. His jaw tensed. The Route 47 detour cut directly along the riverbank on an unstable shoulder, repaired halfway last summer, and then forgotten. He made a mental note to avoid that stretch tonight. Then he gave Noah's shoulder a quick squeeze. "I'll pick you up right after shift," he said. Noah nodded, a timid little motion that still carried the weight of yesterday's embarrassment. Jason felt it like a bruise under the sternum. "Hey, Jason," said, crouching so they were eye level. "You and me. We don't quit just because people don't get it." Noah swallowed. Even if they laugh. Especially then. A faint, hopeful smile flickered across the boy's face. Jason held on to that image for the rest of the morning, right up until the storm broke. By 1 o'clock, rain was falling sideways. What started as a summer storm had turned into something darker, faster, more violent. Forklifts skidded on the polished concrete. Loading bay doors rattled. Outside, the sky had dropped to a bruise-colored twilight, though it was barely midday. At 1:42 p.m., everything changed. The warehouse radios crackled simultaneously with the uneasy tone reserved for confirmed emergencies. School district alert, bus 12. Overdue on modified route. Last confirmed GPS ping Mill Creek Bend. Signal lost. Jason froze mid-scan. The pallet slip fluttered from his hand. Mill Creek Bend. That was the detour. That was the river. The warehouse erupted into fragmented conversations, drivers checking their phones, workers swearing under their breath, rigs barking orders without direction or purpose. Jason didn't hear any of it clearly. His blood roared too loud. Bus 12. That was Noah's bus. His legs moved before his mind caught up, carrying him across the floor toward the lockers. Riggs stepped in front of him, palm out. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" Jason didn't stop. Didn't blink. Didn't budge. "My son is on that bus. You clock out, you're done for the day." "I need all hands." Jason brushed past him like the man wasn't even there. Riggs's voice rose behind him. "If you walk out, don't walk back in." Jason didn't answer. He was already sprinting through the rain. The roads were a sheet of moving water. Wipers slapped uselessly against the windshield. Emergency vehicles screamed in the distance, but they were coming from the north, not the east, and Jason knew the reason the main road into the river bend had already flooded out. The valley had just been cut in two. His chest tightened with memory, snow-blocking roads, GPS failing minutes, slipping like sand, while someone he loved waited with fading breath. Not again. Not again. He reached the old service pull-off near the bend and slammed the truck into park. Rain hammered the roof like fists. The river churned only feet away, swollen and brown, dragging branches and debris downstream in violent spirals. And then he saw it. Not the bus itself, just the faint flashing hazard light half-submerged beneath the crest of the rising water. Caught sideways in the river's grip. Inch by inch, it was being pulled toward the deeper channel. Jason whispered once, sharply, painfully. "Noah." There was no time to wait for responders. They wouldn't make it through this water. The only access point now was the footpath downriver, muddy, narrow, half washed out. But it angled close enough to the trapped bus to try something. He grabbed his emergency pack from behind the seat. Inside rope carabiners, the waterproof ham radio unit, and 3 beacon bands, 2 prototypes, 1 field-ready strap. He strapped one onto his own wrist, felt the familiar, comforting click against his pulse. Then he forced himself into motion. The footpath was barely a path at all, just a suggestion of dirt between weeds thrashing in the storm. The river roared to his left, swollen enough to spray onto the trail. Twice he slipped, smashing his shin into rocks, once nearly pitching forward into the current. He kept moving. Every step he pictured Noah. The way his son bit his lip when he was scared. The way he tried to hide it so Jason wouldn't worry. The way he still slept, curled toward the wall, as though expecting something to fall apart. Jason had failed one family member on a night much like this. He would not fail another. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the shattered guardrail ahead. Wood splintered metal, twisted, and beyond it, the yellow shape of the bus lodged precariously against a concrete spillway. Water surged around its wheels, shoving at it relentlessly. Jason's breath hitched. The rear emergency door was jammed half open. Small hands and white faces appeared in the window. Children's voices carried faintly over the storm. Closer, closer, he slid down the embankment boots, sinking ankle-deep into the sucking mud. The river sucked at his legs, cold enough to steal breath. He waded waist-deep toward the back of the bus, shouting over the wind. "I'm here! Hold on! I'm here!" A girl's voice shrieked something he couldn't make out. One of the kids hammered on the glass. Where was Noah, Dad? The scream punched him like a blow. There, inside, near the back. Noah was standing on a seat, trying to keep above the rising water. Jason's mind sharpened to a single point of focus. Fear dissolved into precision. Everything he'd ever learned about pressure force leverage knots, currents rose as instinct. "Listen to me," he yelled. "Everyone stay together." He hauled himself onto the bus's rear bumper as it lurched violently under his weight, threatening to twist free of the spillway. Inside, water surged up to the children's calves. The emergency latch was bent, jammed. He gripped it with both hands and pulled, muscles screaming rain blinding him. Nothing. Thunder cracked overhead. Dad Noah's voice was raw, terrified. Jason planted one boot against the metal frame, clenched his fists, and pulled with every ounce of strength left in him. His shoulder burned. His grip slipped. For a moment, he thought he'd fall backward into the river. Then the latch gave an ugly metallic snap, and the door swung open. Cold water rushed out around him. The bus groaned under the shift in weight. "Everyone out," Jason shouted. "Use the rail, keep low, take my hand." He clipped the rope to the underframe and fed it to the nearest child, guiding them down one by one. Their small hands trembled, their legs shaking as they crawled toward the bank. The rope steadied them, his voice steadied them more. Lightning flashed again. The bus shifted. He grabbed the final 2 children, pushing them toward safety. Only Noah remained. "Come on!" Jason yelled. But Noah hesitated just for a heartbeat, as though the chaos around them froze him in place. Jason's fear snapped into fierce clarity. "You're okay," he shouted. "Look at me. Come now." Noah leaped. Jason caught him against his chest, water surging around them both. The force knocked him backward, nearly sweeping them off the bumper. The bus groaned a deep, terrible sound, and the front end began to swing free. They had seconds. Jason wrapped one arm around Noah's torso, pressed his son's face into his own shoulder, and with his free hand slapped the beacon band's emergency send button. The band vibrated hard, 3 pulses, meaning the signal cut through. "Hold on," he shouted. He pushed off the bumper with both feet, aiming toward the rope anchored to the spillway. Water hammered them sideways. He slammed into debris, biting back a cry. Noah clung to him with desperate fingers. Jason clawed for the rope, missed, lunged again. His hand caught it. He twisted the rope around his wrist, around his son, holding them together as the river tried to tear them apart. The current dragged them sideways, but the rope held. Behind them, the bus finally broke loose with a grinding roar and vanished downstream. Jason hauled Noah toward the bank, inch by inch, muscles burning, lungs screaming. At last, 2 men appeared above them, neighbors, maybe hikers, stranded by the storm, reaching down, pulling them out of the river's claws. Jason collapsed on the mud, Noah still wrapped around him, shaking violently, but breathing. Someone shouted for first responders. Someone else pointed at Jason's wrist. The beacon band's locator light blinked through the rain, steady, strong, unmistakable. Whoever sent that signal, one of the men said, awed, saved all of them. "Them rescuers got here fast because of it." Another voice broke through the storm, breathless, disbelieving. Amanda Rhodes stood there, soaked to the skin, mascara, streaked chest heaving. Her daughter, pale, coughing, terrified, was wrapped in a blanket behind her. The woman stared at Jason as if seeing his face for the first time, like she'd been blind until this very moment. Her gaze dropped to the blinking beacon band, then to Noah, then back to him. The shift in the air was unmistakable. Every power dynamic had just changed. Rain softened to a steady hiss as the adrenaline drained out of the riverbank. First responders swarmed the scene, paramedics kneeling beside shivering children, firefighters shouting over the radio for backup deputies, stringing yellow tape that instantly sagged in the downpour. The roar of the swollen river faded into a muted backdrop, as if the storm itself was finally catching its breath. But the people standing nearest to Jason weren't breathing at all. They were staring. At the rope burns climbing his wrist, at the beacon band still blinking in stubborn defiance, at Noah clinging to him, shoulders heaving with quiet sobs, and at Jason himself, mud-covered, shaking but impossibly steady in the center of chaos. A cluster of drenched neighbors whispered in low, disbelieving voices. Someone repeated the same phrase twice as though struggling to believe it. He saved them, all of them, with that thing on his arm. Jason didn't answer. He was still focused on the rise and fall of Noah's breathing, slow, ragged, but strong. He brushed wet hair off the boy's forehead, murmuring something only Noah heard. The child tightened his grip, burying his face into Jason's jacket. A medic jogged over, crouched beside them, and touched Jason's shoulder. "You two need to get checked. Hypothermia's creeping in." Jason nodded once, but didn't stand. Not yet. Not until Noah stopped shaking. Across the clearing, Amanda Rhodes was frozen, the same way, one hand over her mouth, the other gripping her daughter's blanket-wrapped form like she feared someone might steal her away again. Her eyes never left Jason, not even for a blink. Fear had drained from her expression long ago. What remained was something else entirely. A kind of stunned reevaluation. A kind of dawning realization. Her daughter Emily lifted her head weakly from her mother's chest. She coughed, winced, then whispered, the man with the strap. He pulled us out." Amanda swallowed hard. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "I know, sweetheart." Another medic approached her with oxygen tubing. She accepted it numbly but didn't look away from Jason, not even when the paramedic asked her a question twice. Flashlights hopped across the ruined guardrail. Deputies waded into the mess to retrieve what they could. One of them held up an intact beacon band, waterlogged, but still glowing. "Ma'am," he called to a nearby firefighter, "this one was on a kid. Same signal as his." The deputy pointed toward Jason. That's how the rescue crews pinpointed the location. We never would have found them in time with the river shaping like this. A ripple of acknowledgement swept through the emergency workers. It wasn't just bravery. It wasn't just luck. Jason had brought technology into the field that none of them had, and it had worked. A reporter from the local news hair plastered to her cheeks appeared with a cameraman in tow. She was mid-question, "Sir, can you tell us how you located the bus before responders arrived when one of the firefighters stepped between her and Jason?" "Give him space," the firefighter said, not unkindly. "He's the reason we're not pulling bodies from that river right now." The reporter lowered her mic. Jason still hadn't said a word. He didn't notice the small crowd forming, didn't see the hesitant admiration in their faces, didn't register the new silence settling over the riverbank. But Amanda did. She finally walked toward him. Her shoes, expensive, mud-splattered, definitely not meant for riverbanks, sank into the soaked ground with every step. Emily followed slowly, hand gripping her mother's coat hem. Jason looked up instinctively as they approached. His posture tightened. His breathing shifted. Some part of him, the part that remembered being mocked in public, dismissed as a distraction, handled like a problem prepared for something sharp. But Amanda stopped 2 feet away and simply folded. Not physically, not completely, but in a way that stripped away every layer of corporate polish and left her standing there as just a mother whose world had nearly ended. "Jason," she said softly, "I saw what you did." Her voice trembled on the final word. A gust of wind rattled the loose branches above them. Jason didn't respond. He only adjusted Noah in his arms and waited. "I didn't understand," she began. "Back at the town hall, when you spoke about safety gaps, systems failing, response delays, I thought you were exaggerating, overcomplicating something simple." She shook her head slowly, bitterly. "I thought you were trying to make yourself sound important." Jason lowered his gaze. "Wasn't about sounding important." "No," she whispered. "It was about what could happen. What did happen, if no one listened." A medic paused beside them. "Sir, I really need to get your core temp." Jason lifted a hand. "1 minute." The medic moved on. Amanda blinked rainwater or tears off her lashes. "That device," she said, nodding to the beacon band. "Those signals, that wasn't luck, was it?" "No," Jason answered quietly. "It was designed for exactly this." A firefighter nearby overheard and let out a low whistle. "Designed," he echoed. "By you," Jason gave a small nod. The firefighter turned to another crew member. "That tech's better than half the gear we've got." But Amanda wasn't hearing them anymore. Her focus tunneled in on Jason's face with a mix of awe and regret. "You never told anyone," she said. "You could build something like this." He almost smiled, but bitterness tugged the corner of his mouth. Nobody asked. Her jaw tightened in shame. Another storm gust ripped through the valley, sending emergency blankets fluttering and scattering leaves across the mud. Amanda steadied her daughter and drew a slow breath. "Jason, I need to know something." Her voice was quieter now, more fragile. "How did you even get to them?" The roads were blocked, responders delayed, GPS. Wasn't updating. Jason's answer came without hesitation. "I lost someone once," he said, "because no one could reach her in time. Because systems failed. Because help was stuck miles away while minutes mattered." His throat tightened. "So I promised myself if I ever saw that kind of danger again, I wouldn't wait for permission. I'd just go." A breath escaped Amanda, half sob, half exhale. Emily stepped closer, small hand reaching out. "Thank you," she whispered to Jason. "For helping us. For helping my friends." Noah stirred against Jason's chest, lifting his head to look at the girl. Something passed between them, an unspoken recognition, a shared moment of survival that bound them in a way adults couldn't fully understand. And in that moment, the riverbank shifted. The workers who'd mocked Jason at the warehouse, the neighbors who'd warned him to stop distracting the boy, the officials who'd shrugged at budget requests for safety improvements. They all saw something they'd been too blind or too proud to see before. Jason wasn't a man chasing attention. He was a man preparing for the tragedy no one else believed could happen. Until it did. A deputy jogged toward them, breathless. "Mr. Miller, word's come down from County Command. They want you on site at the operations tent. They're asking how you stabilized the scene before rescue teams arrived." Jason blinked. "They're asking me? You're the only one who got close. And your locator system, whatever that thing is, cut our search time in half." The deputy lowered his voice. "They want to know if you're willing to consult." Jason stared at him, then at the beacon band, then at Noah. Amanda stepped forward before Jason could answer. "You should go," she said. "They need you." She hesitated, then added, "We all do." The words landed heavier than the rain. And yet something inside Jason wavered. Responsibility, fear, old grief, new expectations. He didn't know if he was ready to carry all of that again. As if sensing the hesitation, Noah tugged gently on his sleeve. "Dad," the boy whispered, eyes wide and earnest. "You always said we make things to help people. You helped today. You can help more." Jason swallowed hard. "It's different now." "No," Noah said, shaking his head. "It's the same. You just won this time." The river roar seemed to fade. The storm quieted. Amanda's next words broke through the stillness with a clarity that cut right to the bone. "Jason, let me help you help them." He looked at her sharply. Her coat was soaked hair, disheveled mascara, running none of the flawless composure she displayed at public meetings. She wasn't a CEO right now. She was a woman who'd nearly lost her daughter and finally understood what kind of man she'd misjudged. "I can get you resources," she said. "Testing, approval, distribution. Whatever you need to make those devices available everywhere they should already be. You shouldn't be building life-saving equipment on a kitchen table while people die waiting for help." Jason's breath caught. Why he whispered. Amanda's eyes glistened. "Because you saved my child. And because you were right. And because no one listened." She stepped closer. "But I'm listening now." Jason didn't answer right away. He looked down at Noah, muddy, exhausted, but watching him with a kind of fragile hope. He looked at Emily wrapped in her blanket, breathing because of a signal made from cheap parts and stubborn determination. He looked at the responders coordinating their next phase, relying on information only he had been able to provide. And for the first time in years, he felt something beyond grief or guilt or quiet resolve. He felt purpose. A medic returned, more insistent this time. "Sir, seriously, we need to evaluate you both before hypothermia sets in." Jason nodded, but before the medic led him away, he gave Amanda one slow, steady look. Not a promise. Not an agreement. Something deeper. Something that meant we aren't finished here. The storm had taken its toll, but it had also opened a door, and Jason knew whether he wanted to or not, he was going to have to walk through it. The only question left was what waited on the other side. By the next morning, the storm had moved east, leaving behind a valley that looked like it had been holding its breath for years, and finally let it all out. Mud clung to everything, the trees, the guardrails, the boots of every first responder still on scene, and the road crews worked in silence that felt almost reverent. Jason stood near an emergency tent, with a blanket draped over his shoulders. Noah pressed close to his side. They'd been cleared by medics, warmed up, fed, and asked the same dozen questions by deputies and disaster officials. Each time, the answers spread wider through the crowd. By sunrise, people he'd never met were coming up to shake his hand. The fire chief, a broad man with a smoke-rough voice, clasped Jason's arm. "You saved that crew. You saved those kids. That signal system. We need to talk about putting that tech in every vehicle we've got." Even the warehouse workers who had mocked him showed up awkward and apologetic. Riggs approached, last hat in hand, staring at the mud around his boots. "I was wrong," he said. Not loud, not performative, just honest in a way Jason had never heard from him. "You see things the rest of us don't. I didn't respect that. I should have." Jason nodded, accepting the apology without rubbing salt in the wound. The river had done enough teaching for all of them. Amanda Rhodes remained nearby with Emily, watching all of it with something like quiet awe. When she finally stepped closer, her tone wasn't sharp or rehearsed. It was soft, steady, stripped clean of ego. "My daughter's alive because you didn't wait for someone else to act." She paused, breath catching. "I won't forget that, Jason. Ever." Then, in front of half the rescue crews and the county director, she made an offer not flashy, not corporate, but sincere. "Let me help you build this properly," she said. "Real funding, real engineers, real distribution channels. Your design can change how emergency response works in this valley and beyond it. If you'll let me, I want to help bring it to the people who need it." Jason didn't answer immediately. He looked down at Noah, who was holding the salvaged beacon band in both hands, like something sacred. "You told me once," Noah said softly, "we make things so other people don't have to feel alone when bad stuff happens." Jason felt something old and heavy lift off his shoulders at that. He finally nodded. "Then let's do it right." 6 months later, the old duplex kitchen table didn't hold wires and soldering irons anymore. Instead, it held Noah's science project about watersheds and a bowl of clementines. Jason's workshop had moved to a converted space in the county's new Emergency Innovation Lab, a partnership funded by Amanda's company, but run independently so the valley could build its own resilience. Beacon bands had gone through 3 redesigns. They were stronger now, waterproof, heat-resistant, with a range far beyond anything Jason originally built by hand. Local fire departments wore them. Search teams used them. Schools taught the basics of locator safety during drills. And at every step, someone asked Jason the same question. "How did you think of this?" He always gave the same answer. "Because someone I loved didn't get found in time. I don't want anyone else living that story." Respect didn't change him. Praise didn't inflate him. But being heard, finally deeply heard, gave him something he hadn't felt in years. A sense of worth that wasn't tangled in grief. A sense of purpose built not from loss, but from what he still had: a son who believed in him, a community learning from its pain, and a future that for once didn't feel like walking into the dark alone. Amanda visited the lab often. She never tried to take ownership. Instead, she listened, asked questions, brought in specialists when Jason needed them, and let him lead the work. Her relationship with Emily changed too, less controlled, more present, as though watching her daughter nearly slip away had reminded her what real priorities looked like. One crisp October afternoon, Amanda and Emily joined Jason and Noah at the ribbon cutting for the valley's new Rapid Response Tower, a structure built to house communications equipment, emergency backups, and the locator network powered by Beacon Tech. Reporters asked for speeches. Jason kept his short. "People think heroes look a certain way," he said. But most days, heroism just means refusing to let tragedy be the last word. This valley proved that when we work together, we can build something stronger than fear. He stepped aside. Noah tugged his sleeve. "Dad," the boy whispered, "you did it." Jason looked out at the crowd. Families reunited, responders clapping. Amanda wiping a subtle tear, and felt something warm settle into his chest. "No," he said quietly. "We did." Years from now, when people in that valley would tell the story of the Mill Creek rescue, they wouldn't talk much about the storm or the river or the broken guardrail. They'd talk about a man who never asked for attention, who built something at a kitchen table because grief had taught him exactly how long a minute could be, who ran toward danger when common sense had said to wait, who proved that courage isn't loud, it's steady. And they'd remember the boy who watched his father do the impossible and learned from it that ordinary hands can build extraordinary hope. In the end, that was the message the valley carried forward. Sometimes the world changes because someone refuses to accept that help has to arrive too late.